Hi, my name's Shasta, and I'll be talking to you guys today about climate change and my role. So, recently, COVID has changed our lives drastically, and we kind of see it as a temporary wave, something that will subside and be a thing of the past. But during this, we've failed to see the full picture. Climate change isn't temporary like a pandemic. It's not going to just wash over us and dissipate. We have to get prepared now to avoid getting washed away. So, what can we do? Climate change is already happening, and we're already seeing the effects, such as loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, longer, more intense heat waves. We can give up and be hopeless, or we can gear up and take this head on. So, here's how I got here. Starting out, I knew nothing about climate change, recycling, or any standard sustainability practices. So in middle school, I wrote articles for the school newspaper and researched the importance of recycling and ways to recycle. In high school, I got a better understanding of recycling and did my best to recycle at the school. I also started to understand the wastefulness of single use plastic water bottles. And in my first year of college, I had an awesome professor, and he told us about public recycling bins that are provided in each county in Ohio. And so I got involved. I found a couple of the public bins, grabbed a couple of totes, and turned my family's once trash that went to the landfills into recyclables. We've been recycling ever since. And after this, my priority was to get rid of plastic water bottles rather than just recycling them. And since we already had a water dispenser, I gradually shifted my family to be full-time refillable water bottle users. And then my climate action plan came into the picture. I geared up with it and started out looking at my overall CO2 output. It was around 54 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. Wasn't pretty. And it was only 19% better than average. And then looking at this, we'd have to see how many Earths would be needed to support if everyone lived like me. It was 5.8. Unfortunately, we only have one Earth, so this math isn't going to work out. And then I looked at plastic. I was doing all right because of the work that I had done before, but it was still an area that needs a lot of work. And then moving on to the water footprint, which was a new concept for me, looking and seeing that mine was only slightly below the global average and that the majority of it came from food, this was interesting and concerning to me. So figuring out how I could lessen my impact in that way was important. So based off of a climate action plan board, that was a template. It set SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. And these were in the categories waste, food, energy, and transport. And I also wanted to just have an overall more sustainable life. So trying to apply these goals, I started by looking at waste. Starting out was always hard. And so finding one thing you would want to change and going for it can lead you down a great path. And so I found one thing, and that one thing was remembering that my garbage isn't just in the here and now. It accumulates until it's in a landfill, and landfills are something that we have to maintain, and they produce a lot of CO2 as well. And so the other method we turn to and say that is so much better than going to a landfill is recycling. And unfortunately, this waste stream is also not without their own issues, such as facilities having more material than they can handle and people abusing the systems. And there's also political issues when it comes to recycling. As a lot of the recycling in the US was shipped to China, but as China has now restarted to refuse some of the plastics as they aren't recyclable, it's led to these being put into landfills and incinerators. So eliminating the amount of packaging we buy instead of just recycling is critical. And so that food aspect I was discussing, as this takes up a lot of my water footprint, was also important. Learning that the global livestock emissions are around 7.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year, representing around 14.5% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gases, was astonishing. And a simple thing as eating less meat or buying from sustainable local farmers markets can really help, and pushing towards more of veggie-based diet can really just put us in a more sustainable practices, or even growing our own food. And also making sure that we use what we buy is important, as 81.4 billion pounds of food is wasted in the US in a year. And that's around 30 to 40% of the food supply. And this is critical as landfills produce 80 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent in a year, about 11% of all methane generated by humans. These are all really big numbers, and just being conscious about what we buy and what we consume is really important. And then moving to energy and transportation, the more traditional sense of sustainable practices. And this is the one I have the least control over. I really only have control over the amount I use of my electricity and the efficiency of my appliances. And so supporting things like Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council, or SOPEC, and other energy aggregation organizations helps to introduce renewables into the energy market and put aside funding for other renewable energy projects. And planning for my future, ensuring that my vehicle later in my life will be less reliant on fossil fuels, is important to me. And as governments go and prohibit fossil fuel car sales, like the UK is by the year 2030, can really help to eliminate the pressures that are on consumers, but rather make larger scale changes for the entire country. And as governments start to push towards these goals and help limit carbon emissions as a whole, like the US rejoining the Paris Agreement, will help to put less pressure on the energy and vehicle consumer. So if you're with me, let's get ahead of the wave of climate change and start making a difference today. Thank you.